You wake before the sun fully clears the mountains, and for a moment Ephesus is only light, salt, and silence. A sea breeze moves inland from the Aegean, carrying the smell of brine, cedar smoke, and wet stone across a city that seems too bright, too vast, too certain of itself to ever disappear. Marble roofs catch the first pale gold of morning. Colonnades emerge from shadow. Far below, the harbor is already beginning to stir. It is the year 110 AD, and you are standing inside one of the richest cities in the Roman world. Ephesus was not built like a frontier fortress at the edge of conquest. It was built like a magnet. Wealth from the east flowed toward it. Silk, spices, incense, ivory, grain, marble, silver, and stories from distant kingdoms all converged here before spilling into the Mediterranean. Money did not merely pass through Ephesus. It settled into its streets, its temples, its houses, and into the habits of the people who lived among its splendor. But this city is more than trade. It is a place where Greek civic pride, Roman power, and far older Anatolian devotion exist side by side, pressing against one another without ever fully blending. It is a city of merchants and magistrates, priests and artisans, philosophers and laborers. It is polished, educated, and astonishingly alive. And yet, even at the height of its glory, something is already working against it. Beneath the wealth, beneath the ceremonies, beneath the confidence of stone and empire, Ephesus is fighting a slow war it cannot truly control. Today, you will live an entire day inside that brilliance. You will walk its marble roads, enter its sacred heart, and watch its greatness at the exact moment it still believes it will last forever. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the hillside houses of Ephesus are still cool from the night. From the street, your home reveals almost nothing. Its outer walls are plain, high, and quiet, turned toward the narrow-stepped lane with a kind of deliberate restraint. In a city dense with wealth, beauty is not always displayed to strangers. It is protected, hidden behind stone, and reserved for those invited past the threshold. Inside, everything changes. You step from your sleeping chamber into the central courtyard, and the house opens like a private world arranged against the noise of the city below. The first light falls across black and white mosaics laid with mathematical precision. Painted walls glow with deep red, saffron, and blue. The figures on the frescoes, muses, masks, garlands, fragments of myth, seem to wake with the sun. Water slips steadily from a lead pipe into a marble basin, its sound soft and continuous, a small sign of the engineering that makes elite life in Ephesus feel almost effortless. This is not luxury built from excess alone. It is luxury built from systems. Aqueducts bring fresh water across distance and elevation. Drainage carries waste away. Beneath the floors of the dining room, heated air can move through hidden spaces during the damp winter months. Comfort here is architectural. Wealth has been turned into order. Servants are already awake. A lamp is extinguished. Sandals touch mosaic. A folded linen tunic is brought to you, light and expensive. Suitable for a man whose name carries weight in trade and civic life alike. You fasten a worked silver belt around your waist, a quiet reminder that your status rests not only on office, but on craft, reputation, and long networks of exchange. From this height, before you descend into the streets, you can feel what Ephesus truly is. Not merely a port, not merely a provincial city, but a place where private refinement is sustained by public power. Somewhere below, carts are already moving toward the harbor. Somewhere beyond the walls, the temple waits in the morning haze, and somewhere beneath all this beauty, the machinery of the city has already begun its day. By the time you leave the house, the city is fully waking. The stepped lane below the terrace houses is narrow and cool, cut between walls that hold the night a little longer than the open streets below. You begin your descent toward the lower city, moving down worn stone stairs polished by generations of sandals, servants, magistrates, and merchants. Above you, the elite homes cling to the slope in ordered layers. Below you, Ephesus opens outward, wider and louder with every turn. The streets thicken first with movement, then with purpose. Porters balance loads across their shoulders. Shopkeepers pull back wooden shutters. Donkeys strain against carts of grain, amphora, and building stone. A bronze worker is already hammering at his bench. Somewhere nearby, bread is coming out of an oven, and the warm smell drifts briefly through the sharper scents of dust, oil, and animals. No one here moves without reason. Even before the harbor comes into view, you can feel its pull in everything around you. At the foot of the slope, the city gathers itself into formal space. The Arcadian way stretches ahead of you in pale marble, broad and deliberate, running between colonnades toward the harbor like a statement of civic confidence. This is not just a road, this is the spine of a metropolis. Men in white tunics pass officials in darker cloaks. Clerks carry wax tablets. Sailors fresh off ships move beside boys delivering messages uphill. As the avenue widens and the morning brightens, you can hear the harbor before you see it. Gulls, shouted prices, creaking timber, ropes dragged across wood, and the low, constant roar of thousands of transactions beginning at once. In Ephesus, wealth is never far away, but down here, for the first time this morning, you no longer sense it as comfort. You sense it as motion, pressure, and scale itself. The harbor of Ephesus does not greet the morning gently. It erupts into it. As you reach the waterfront, the full force of the city's commerce hits you at once. The slap of waves against hulls, cranes groaning under weight, overseers shouting in Greek and Latin, sailors cursing, animals braying, merchants arguing over quality, tax, and timing. Every berth is crowded. Deep-bellied cargo ships sit low in the water, their decks stacked with amphorae, timber, cloth, and crates marked by ports from across the eastern Mediterranean. This is where Ephesus becomes impossible to mistake for an ordinary city. Its harbor is not local in character. It is global by the standards of the ancient world. Silk has traveled here through deserts and caravan routes from lands far beyond Rome's direct reach. Frankincense from Arabia releases its sharp, resinous scent as bales are cut open for inspection. Egyptian grain arrives in great ceramic containers, heavy enough to feed whole quarters of the city. Marble from the islands waits beside worked metal, dyed textiles, spices, papyrus, and finely crafted luxury goods destined for men and women who may never see the sea that carried them here. Around you, language overlaps in restless layers. Greek dominates, but Latin moves through it with official authority. Aramaic rises from traders who know the inland routes. Local accents from Western Anatolia cut through both. Deals are made by gesture as often as speech. Hands sway, point, refuse, accept. Wax tablets are marked, seals are checked, porters bend under impossible loads and keep moving. Nothing in this place feels still. Money changes shape every second here. Grain becomes tax revenue. Silver becomes credit. Cargo becomes influence. The harbor is not simply attached to Ephesus. It feeds the city, defines it, and justifies its splendor. But as you look across the busy water, past the ships and shouting men, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. All this wealth depends on a harbor that is already beginning to choke. Beyond the noise of bargaining and the gleam of imported wealth, The harbor is fighting a battle that never truly ends. The Caister River, descending from the interior, carries down a slow and relentless burden of silt. Day after day, season after season, it empties mud into the basin that keeps Ephesus alive. The water still looks open from a distance, but the danger is already there, thickening at the bottom, narrowing channels, stealing depth from ships that need every foot of clearance. You watch the counterattack unfold in brute mechanical rhythm. Flat wooden dredging barges move awkwardly across the harbor, guided into place by shouted commands and poles. Laborers, many of them enslaved, strain at ropes and winches while heavy buckets bite into the dark sludge below. Timber cranes swing, drip, and rise again. Engineers measure, direct, and correct, trying to impose geometry on a river that does not care about plans, taxes, or imperial prestige. Mud is hauled up, tipped aside, and already replaced by more. It is difficult to imagine a sharper contrast. Above the harbor stand marble avenues, colonnades, polished homes, and the institutions of a city that believes itself refined. Down here, the future of all that elegance depends on wet clay, raw muscle, and endless repetition. Every cargo unloaded this morning, every fortune counted in silver, every civic monument funded by trade rests on this hidden labor. Ephesus is not sustained by beauty alone. It survives because men work against the earth every single day. And even now, the earth is patient. By the time the sun climbs higher and the worst of the harbor noise begins to blur into a single metallic roar, your attention turns away from commerce and toward something even more central to Ephesian life. Beyond the city walls across the plain, a different kind of power is waiting. By the late morning, you leave the harbor behind and pass out through the city gates, where the noise of trade begins to loosen its grip. The sacred way stretches ahead across the flat land northeast of the city, paved and purposeful, pulling pilgrims, officials, merchants, and petitioners toward the most revered place in Ephesus. The air feels different here. The shouting fades. Wheels and hooves sound duller on the road. Even the wind seems to move with less urgency. Then, across the plain, the temple appears. At first, it is only a brightness on the horizon, something too large to read clearly at a distance. But with each step, its scale becomes more unsettling. The Temple of Artemis does not simply rise from the land, it dominates it. White marble catches the midday sun so fiercely that parts of the structure seem to glow against the softer earth around it. The columns begin to separate into countable forms, then into a forest of stone too vast for a single glance to hold. This is the true center of Ephesus. The harbor brings in wealth, but this sanctuary gives the city meaning. Men may talk of trade, law, and imperial favor, yet all of them lived beneath the protection of a goddess whose presence reaches beyond commerce. Here, Greek beauty, Anatolian antiquity, and civic pride are fused into something larger than architecture. As you draw nearer, one thing becomes clear. You are not approaching a monument. You are approaching an institution powerful enough to shape money, law, and faith all at once. The closer you come, the more the Temple of Artemis seems to resist ordinary measurement. It is too long, too open, too radiant to feel entirely like the work of human hands. The platform stretches broad across the sanctuary, and above it rises that astonishing ring of columns, tall enough to dwarf the men moving at their base into little more than passing shadows. Sunlight slides down polished marble. Bronze fittings flash along the roofline. Incense drifts through the warm air. Even before you step inside, the building has already achieved its purpose. It has made you feel small. But in Ephesus, awe is only part of the design. The sanctuary is also one of the most trusted financial centers in the ancient world. Wealth does not merely decorate this place. It is stored here, protected here, counted here. Kings, merchants, magistrates, and powerful families deposit fortunes under the authority of the goddess, trusting that no thief wishes to invite sacrilege on such a scale. Scribes sit with ledgers and tablets, recording sums, names, weights, and obligations. Seals are checked. Witnesses observe. Silver changes status the moment it enters this sacred system. Here, religion becomes security, and security becomes power. You present the profits of your own trade, not to a private banker, but to a temple that can command more trust than many cities. This is what makes Ephesus extraordinary. Its deepest reservoir of confidence is not housed in a palace or treasury alone, it is housed in devotion. And the sanctuary's authority reaches beyond money. Within the bounds of Artemis, another force operates, asylum. Beneath the shade of the colonnades, you see those who have fled the ordinary reach of power. Runaway slaves sit quietly with their backs against cool stone. Political exiles keep their heads low. Debtors linger in anxious silence, protected for now by the sanctity of the place. Outside these walls, officials can command, arrest, punish, and confiscate. Inside them, human law hesitates. That is the true magnitude of this temple. It is a wonder to the eye, a bank to the wealthy, and a refuge to the desperate. In a Roman world obsessed with rank and control, this is a place where divine authority can still interrupt the machinery of men. And deeper inside, beyond the bright courts and public transactions, the goddess herself is waiting. Inside the inner sanctuary, the brilliance of the outer court falls away almost at once. The air turns cool, dim, and heavy with the scent of cedar oil, myrrh, and smoke. Light no longer pours down in broad sheets of sun. It trembles instead from oil lamps, catching on bronze, polished stone, and suspended threads of incense. After the bright geometry of columns and marble, this chamber feels older, stranger, and harder to explain. It does not invite admiration first, it invites submission. At the center stands the image of Artemis of Ephesus. So she is nothing like the familiar Greek huntress imagined elsewhere in the Mediterranean, the young goddess with bow in hand and motion in her body. The deity worshipped here belongs to a deeper past, and to this land more than to any empire that governs it. She stands rigid and frontal, carved in dark wood, her form enclosed in a long, pillar-like garment covered with animals and sacred forms. Lions, stags, and fantastic creatures gather across her surface as if the natural world itself has been pressed into ritual order. On her head rests a high mural crown, shaped like the walls of a city. It is a statement as much as an ornament. Artemis is not only a goddess of nature or fertility here, she is the guardian of Ephesus itself, the divine force imagined above its gates, markets, treasuries, and homes. And across her chest hangs the feature that later ages will misunderstand: a heavy arrangement of rounded, polished ornaments, mysterious and opulent, suggesting abundance, offering, and sacred power rather than simple bodily realism. Attendants move around the statue with deliberate care. Priests tend the image with oils and cloths, preserving not just an object, but a presence. Young priestesses serve nearby, and among the symbols repeated here again and again is the bee, emblem of order, prosperity, and disciplined devotion. In a city where ships bring goods from every horizon, this small local symbol still carries enormous meaning. Ephesus may be open to the world, but its soul remains fiercely its own. In this chamber, that truth becomes unmistakable. Rome governs. Greek speech fills the streets. Foreign merchants crowd the harbor. But here, in the dark heart of the sanctuary, the city kneels before something older than them all. When you finally turn back toward the light outside, you are not simply leaving a temple. You are carrying with you the invisible force that holds Ephesus together. By the time you return within the city walls, the sun has moved westward, and the great theater is already filling. Carved into the slope of Mount Pion, it rises in sweeping tiers of stone, immense enough to hold tens of thousands, yet shaped with such intelligence that even a single voice can climb to the highest row. The scale is imperial. The effect is intimate. Every seat seems to lean toward the stage. Today, no actors perform, no tragic mask appears, no chorus enters. The theater belongs instead to the citizens. You take your place among magistrates, merchants, landowners, and other men whose influence reaches into the machinery of the city. Below, an orator steps forward and begins to speak on matters that touch every life in Ephesus: public spending, maintenance of the harbor, new building works, and the growing cost of preserving a city whose beauty must constantly be defended by labor. His words are measured, elegant, and sharpened by training. He does not simply present arguments, he arranges them for effect, turning civic policy into performance. Around you, the crowd listens with unusual discipline. Good reasoning draws approval. A powerful metaphor ripples upward in murmurs of satisfaction. Weak logic is met with open discontent. In Ephesus, education is not ornamental, it is public currency. To speak poorly before this audience is to expose yourself. But this assembly is about more than style. Under Roman rule, the city still guards the habits of an older Greek civic life: debate, persuasion, public reputation, and the belief that a man should be judged not only by his wealth, but by how he uses his voice among other citizens. Here, on these stone seats, Ephesus reveals another source of its greatness. It is not merely rich, it is self-aware. As evening settles over Ephesus, the sharp edge of the day begins to soften. In the commercial agora, merchants start packing away what remains of their goods beneath the shelter of long colonnades. The smell of spices still hangs in the cooling air. Bronze catches the last amber light. Booksellers roll and tie their papyrus scrolls. Bakers sell the final warm loaves of the day beside wedges of goat cheese, baskets of figs, and jars of olives. After the roar of the harbor and the solemn weight of the temple, this hour feels almost intimate, as if the city is briefly exhaling before night. You make your way back uphill to the terrace houses where another world waits behind blank exterior walls. Lamps are being lit. Water glimmers in the courtyard basin. Cushions are arranged in the dining room, and servants carry in platters fragrant with thyme, garlic, oil, and roasted meat. Guests begin to arrive: fellow magistrates, prosperous merchants, and visitors from cities farther east, men whose wealth has traveled with them in contracts, cargo, and rumor. They recline beside you as wine is poured from painted jugs and mixed with cool water. The meal is a display of cultivated abundance. There is lamb roasted until tender, seafood brought in fresh from the coast, herbs crushed at the table, sweet figs split open under the lamplight, and pomegranates whose color seems almost too vivid to belong to the natural world. Conversation moves as elegantly as the servants. Names of governors and emperors pass from couch to couch. Someone speaks of Trajan and the shape of Roman ambition. Another mentions strange new religious movements gaining followers in the eastern provinces. Then, as if no banquet in Ephesus can avoid it for long, the talk turns back to trade, dredging, the harbor, and the river that will not stop bringing mud. Within these painted walls, however, anxiety feels refined rather than urgent. Wealth has a way of muting fear. Art softens it. Ritual contains it. Good food and trained voices hold disorder at a distance for a few more hours. By midnight, the guests are gone. The house falls quiet. You step alone into the open courtyard and look up through the square of night above you. The stars are sharp and innumerable. From far below comes the faint pulse of a city not yet fully asleep. You cannot know what will happen in the centuries ahead. You cannot see the harbor silting shut, the shoreline creeping away, the fevered swamps, the fading trade, the ruin of the temple, the outlawing of its cult, or the marble of Ephesus carried off to raise monuments elsewhere. Tonight, none of that seems possible. Tonight, the harbor is deep, silver still moves through the markets, and Artemis still watches over a city that believes its greatness belongs to eternity.